let's get started. Welcome to Smart Sheriff, Damn Idea, the Wild West of government-assisted parenting. So this is about a mobile application that we pen tested twice. So first we will give a little bit of background information about how all this happened. Then we will go through the 2 penetration test reports showing some highlights, some things about the report, some our results, and then we will talk about Smart Dream, which is an application that we didn't look at the time, but we looked at a little bit about later, and then some future work. So I'm Abraham, and he's Fabian, and we work for Cure 53. And if you are the kind of person that likes to read penetration testing reports, some of our reports are public, so you can enjoy them there. And you might also know me from OWASP WTF. I'm the project leader for that, so just like in my t-shirt, just type that in your browser and that takes you there. If you are interested into that, it's the Offensive Web Testing Framework, an OWASP flagship project. So let's, Fabian, tell your story.
The story we are telling you today is happening right now or for quite some time in South Korea. Korea is a very special country because, according to surveys, it has one of the highest smartphone usages in the world. So you can see here, if you look at the total population, at almost like 90%. And if you look at young adults, it's basically 100%. For this talk, though, it would be more interesting to have statistics about the smartphone usage from children and kids in school. But unfortunately, I couldn't find the statistics. But the company we will shortly introduce says it's about at 80%. I've also included here Poland to the right here. Apparently that's pretty low. So just to give you an idea that smartphones are a very big thing in South Korea, and it's a big part of their society. So in late 2014, the Korean government introduced a law in the Korean Telecommunications and Business Act where they were saying that mobile network operators have to provide some kind of filtering or blocking when they want to do business with children or teenagers or general legal minors. At that time, the law didn't have a lot of details on what exactly this is about. And a few months later, they added some implementation details defining certain aspects of this blocking. For example, the child and the parent have to be informed about what exactly the features are of this blocking, but also a notification if the blocking was disabled for more than 15 days or if it has been not operating properly. Whatever this law says, this basically resulted in a mandatory installation of a surveillance app when a phone is bought for a teenager. And there is also no opt-out for it because it's basically defined by the law. So even if parents wouldn't want this and feel that it's an invasion of the privacy of their kids, at first the salesperson in the store would have to install this on their phones anyway. And here's a photo of a poster hanging in front of a South Korean store informing their customers about this new law, saying that they are contractually now obliged to provide some blocking, also informing that they have to install those applications, and some details about the law, for example, with the 15 days notifications if it hasn't been operating and stuff like that. The result of this law was also that the Korean government directly funded a company to develop like the standard application funded by the government. And this company is called Mobile Internet Business Association, MOIBA. And yeah, the Korean government gave them basically $2.7 million to develop such applications, including some services around it, because if you will see the state of those applications, it's a bit scary to think that this money was spent on those. But before we really head in, just quickly tell you about how this project even started. OpenNet Korea is an organization in South Korea dealing with political issues, and they raised this whole law to the attention of Citizen Lab. And then Citizen Lab, as part of their summer institute in Toronto, were looking at this kind of application and also asked us to help and also do a penetration test on it. And also this whole thing was partially funded by the Open Technology Fund. So just to give you properly credit that we didn't come up with this project, and those people do a lot of work, especially also fighting now against this law in South Korea. So MOIBA got money and developed 2 applications. One is Smart Sheriff and the other one Smart Dream. At the time when we were doing this research, Smart Sheriff was the only application that was in scope. And Smart Dream was another application by MOIBA, it wasn't. So at the time we had only looked at Smart Sheriff. If you compare the functionality of those 2 applications, Smart Sheriff is about restricting the usage of the phone, denying access to certain apps, or defining at what times a phone is allowed to be used or not. And obviously the security of this application, we don't have to, it's clear that something was awful that we are standing here today. And another application, Smart Dream, which was not in scope, but we also looked at that, and we will provide some information about that later in the talk. So when you first install Smart Sheriff, it runs as 2 different modes. So either you run it as a parent mode or as in child mode. If you run it on a parent's phone in parent mode, you will be able to see usage statistics of your child, you see the name and the phone number, and some statistics, how much they use the internet, how much they use apps, and how many hours they use their phone and stuff like that. If you install it as a child mode, it will install itself as a device administrator, because it wants obviously a bit more privileges to block applications and see all the applications installed and things like that. So the features of Smart Sheriff are, as we mentioned before, are on one hand denying access at certain times. For example, you want to block your child that it's not allowed to use the phone during the night. And it's obviously because of smartphone addiction in young adults and stuff like that. The other feature is that you can see the installed applications on the phone, and you can also deny access to certain applications. If you want to ground your kid and it plays too much Candy Crush or something, you can deny access to that one. You see here also a third tab called Website Management, which is additional functionality to block access to certain websites the parent doesn't want the kid to visit. This feature is actually disabled, at least on the parent interface. The code is there, the child application is basically acting on it and looking at the websites visited, but the administrator interface for the parent is deactivated, but the code is still there. So we started our preparations.
So the first problem when you test an application that is written in an interesting but exotic Asian language is what does its button do, right? Like we don't speak any Korean, so this was the first problem. So to solve this, simply using APK tool, you have the link there if you're not aware about it. Just get the strings XML file translated with Google, and then pack again the tool, and then automatically we get to understand what each button is saying and all that kind of stuff. Another trick that we had to do was on the web views we had to intercept the request with the proxy and then translate that and then replace it so that on the application we could get something that we can understand. So that's one of the first challenges. Then another thing was that we had to modify some of the features of the application so that we get some extra debugging messages and things like this. So for this, you can use Smally opcodes, and this is a useful website for that if you are into that. So that's another thing that we had to do. And then after doing this, we were ready to start. And the first problem that we found was this JavaScript interface. So a JavaScript interface on Android basically gives the WebView the ability to invoke any Java class on the phone, right? So it's essentially on all Android versions from Android 2.4 to Android 4.1. It's essentially giving you remote code execution on the phone, right? And the problem is because this is all using clear text HTTP, so there's no encryption. So anybody on a Wi-Fi hotspot, whatever, can see traffic like this, and they can modify the page that the WebView is going to load and exploit the phone and run any code that they want on the phone. right? Although another thing I wanted to say is that even though this is on old phones, like old phones are still very common. Like most of you probably know somebody running Android 4.1 or less, right? In your family. So this is a problem, right? Like because mobile phones will always favor Wi-Fi over mobile networks just because of the whole caps and all this with mobile traffic when you use a mobile provider. So that's one of the findings. Then another interesting thing is that they were not using any encryption, so they were it was all like over clear text HTTP. There's no HTTPS anywhere, but they were encrypting some strings. Right? So one of the strings that they were encrypting was the phone number. So the phone number encrypted looks like this, and decrypted looks like this. But essentially, they were doing this using just an XOR. So XOR is cool because you can use it for encryption and decryption. So they were like, you XOR this and you get the phone, and you XOR this and you get this, right? So to their defense, they were using null characters, maybe to trick if you were using like strings on the APK or something. But the key to encrypt and decrypt has to be on the mobile application. So you just extract it from the APK, and from there you can encrypt and decrypt all these strings trivially, right? So let me tell you a story. Let's pretend that, you know, there's this bad guy at school who really wants to mess with all the children in the class, you know, and, you know, really screw the life of all the kids. So Smart Sheriff is an API for these kids, right? Smart Sheriff invented the Bully API, an API where nasty children like this can really screw with people. So you always, like in life, you always have to ask questions. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is that you don't get a reply, right? So this bully kid can ask Smart Sheriff, hey, this is the phone number of this child. And then Smart Sheriff will tell you, sure, this is the parent's phone number. And then you can ask them, okay, but can you tell me the password of this parent? And Smart Sheriff will say, sure, here's the password of the parent. So automatically the bully kid gets access to the parent for that child. So he gets control over everything that we explained about at the beginning, right? Like what applications can you run, during what times of the day you can use the phone, and all that. So you can really screw a child up with all this, right? So this is one of the findings. And this is what the password leak looks like more technically. So simply a very trivial curl command here at the top. This is the encrypted mobile phone with the XOR thing that we explained about before. And then this is the password, which is in XOR, encrypted with the XOR thing again. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that is the phone. So that's what it looks like in practice. So doing this, of course, we automated this, and we just trained random numbers because there were so many users. I think at its peak it was like 500,000 people using this application, 500,000 children and parents. So just trying random Korean numbers, we could get like a lot of phone numbers and passwords and who's the parent and what is the password of the parent, you know. So all these things we could enumerate like that. And then another thing that you could do as a really mean child is to fake the usage. So you can say, for example, hey, this child is searching for porn. This child has installed a porn application on the phone, right? And then the parent is going to get the alert. So, you can do all this nasty stuff to other children in the classroom, right? And then just as an example of just sloppy coding, right? Like when you send a login request when you see an AJAX login request to a web server, right? Like you expect back a JSON response saying successful or not, something like this. So instead of a JSON response, they were sending like an entire like JavaScript tag. This is the this is the AJAX response from the login request, and then in here there's the number of tries, and depending on the number of tries, then a different alert is going to trigger. because if you exceed the tries, then it's going to say that the account is locked out. So this is just an example of how messy like the the whole application was, right? Then this is a section that we call like why not, because we were just so shocked that it was so bad that we just said, why not? You know, why not run Tomcat 6.029, which was released 7 years ago? Like, why not? You know? And why not blog websites like this? You know? So essentially, this is the blacklist for all the websites. Like, if you are not allowed to visit some website, so if the website contains the MOIBA URL, then it would let it through. So let's say you have blog.com, so you just add a parameter containing that, then that's allowed. So, you know, why not? It's just another example. Then development snippets everywhere. There were test phones, test credentials that we found, like a lot of things like this. So essentially, a big pile of poo. We found XSS, SQL injection on the mobile app, and safe storage of the blog history on the SD card. And just don't take my word for it. Like, this is the report, it's public. You can go to this URL and you can read it, you know? It's serious. Like, we are not making this up. It was this bad, you know? So now Fabian will tell us about what happened after this first report.
So Citizen Lab has been in contact with MOIBA very early on, was talking with developers, and also MOIBA obviously had in the beginning some legal threats. But MOIBA, Citizen Lab and OpenNet Korea were very careful. They asked their lawyers and stuff like that. So in the end, they did a responsible disclosure because they wanted to at least not endanger those children that use the service. So we gave our report to Citizen Lab. Citizen Lab contacted MOIBA, gave them the report, and they started fixing stuff. So here's MOIBA's first press release after the contact. And they started saying that they continue, improve security, and they enhance now the security with SSL. No words or credits given to Citizen Lab, no words on that the application has some issues or whatever. They're making it sound like they do some good work, they analyze their own security issues and update it. A few days later, a second press release from MOIBA saying even that they are deprecating now the old version, which seems actually pretty cool. You know, maybe they realized, let's get rid of this old code. This was we need to completely rewrite it. We need to deprecate it. So that looks pretty good. I really like that. They are also sorry for this inconvenience now that they have to now change the application and that you should please update. And again, claiming they are continuing strengthen the security of the service and the application. Again, no word that research was done by Citizen Lab and nothing else. So Citizen Lab publishes the first report with press release in different languages and basically asking, are the kids all right in South Korea? Which got a little bit of media attention. Some news outlets were reporting on it and saying that reporting on those awful surveillance applications that are endangering more children than it actually protects them from the dangerous dark corners of the internet. But the reaction was a little bit underwhelming to us. In the end, it felt like not much came out of it. And we felt like they just got a free pen test for their for their mobile application, and we didn't achieve anything. And we felt like this whole thing backfired, actually, and we thought now we helped improving a surveillance application, which our first goal was to get rid of this, and now we just made it stronger by responsible disclosure, everything, and they fixing it, and you know, now it's secure, and we felt we just helped them. So, hurt, but motivated for a second round, we did a retest.
So, in this second round, first we will take a brief look. Like, you remember like everything I talked about before, right? So this is the only thing that they fixed, right? So they fixed the filter bypass that I showed about before, so that the web blocking works right. They started using SSL. They fixed the development leaks, like all the development phone numbers and all those things that were there, and they fixed an XSS on the MOIBA website. So everything else, they didn't fix. Everything else that we talked about, the bully API and all this, they didn't fix that. Okay, so now they started using SSL. We'll give them that. But they overrode all the Android, all the Android functions so that they ignore the host name and they ignore all the SSL errors. And then when there's an SSL error, they'll just proceed. Yeah. So essentially, you can man in the middle as if there was no SSL because it's going to accept any certificate, right? So, that was one of the findings. And then another one was the Bully API 2.0. So this is the same as the old one. So this was the old one. It was called message request. So the new one is message request new. And but message request, which they said they deprecated, they didn't. And to this day, like even yesterday we tried, this thing is still open, and it's open to all the issues of the first report, which is public since months ago, and all the issues are still there. So, so new endpoint, but the old endpoint works as it used to. Now, let's talk about the new endpoint. So the new endpoint, instead of using XOR, is using AES. Okay, so that's an improvement. But again, the key is on the phone. And because the application is going to accept any certificate, you can man in the middle all the traffic, so you can get to read everything, and there's going to be no warnings to the user. So you can just, using the key that is on the APK in the phone, you can just decrypt things again, and you can see like what the phone number is, and then, and then the other cool thing is, this is the AES thing, and then this decrypts to the XOR thing, so then you have to do the XOR. So anyway, so this is what it looks like, and essentially the Bully API still works, so you can, given the phone number of a child, you ask Smart Sheriff, the API, and the API tells you, hey, this is the parent phone number, and then you ask for the password, and then it gives you the password back. Now, this is another interesting thing. In this second version, because on the first report we were using curl to demonstrate as an example, they were giving asterisks if the user agent was curl. But if you change that to IE or whatever else, then the password was without the asterisk, was the real password. So it still wasn't fixed, and it was really funny. So yeah, changing the user agent, and then of course the impersonation of saying, hey, this child is searching for porn, or this child is doing whatever evil thing that is going to trigger an alert to the parent to put the child in trouble. So that still worked as well. So you can still fake the phone usage, like saying the child installs a porn application, whatever. So the second round, another pile of poo. They fixed what matters to them. So they fixed the development leaks, they fixed the XSS, they fixed the web filtering, but they didn't fix all the privacy problems in the application. And seriously, just take a look. The report is public, it's there, you can go and read it, And now Fabian will explain what happened after this round.
So we published our second report, or gave that to Citizen Lab. Citizen Lab, again, responsibly disclosed basically the same stuff to MOIBA. Now today, the API is still available, but the password leak seems to be fully gone. Well, maybe you find a user agent that still responds to the password. I don't know. Haven't checked that detail. But they made an updated report asking the questions if the kids are still at risk, and providing, again, press releases in different languages and all this kind of stuff. And suddenly something crazy happens. MOIBA started to react, and they pulled the application from the Android market. And they were a bit whiny in their press release, like, oh, we offer free services for 12 years now, and that 80% of the kids in school have a phone, and but there's this new law now, and yeah, but they regret that they decided now to stop Smart Sheriff, and please move to one of the alternatives from other mobile operators. So this is obviously not the only application out there. And we started to see some news, like Smart Sheriff disappeared from the Android store, and we felt really stoked. Like, we were really happy. We thought we are not Edward Snowden. We didn't uncover some crazy surveillance, but we thought, we helped a little bit fighting the good fight and get rid of some awful surveillance application out there. Internally, we were joking to call ourselves lawmaker or something like that. But in the end, this was a little bit of fail, but something shady was happening. So here's a note that Citizen Lab added to their report saying that, yes, MOIBA removed Smart Sheriff, but the API remains still available. Okay, well, maybe they just let it slowly run out at that time. Well, today we know they didn't. And additionally, it looks like that Smart Sheriff was just republished under a different name, now called Cyber Safety Zone. And this new version looks very similar and looks like as if it was just the original. So we asked ourselves, did we fail? Did we not get rid of this application? Here's a screenshot from a Korean app store. So this is not the Google Play Store, showing an application called Cyber Relief Zone or Cyber Safety Zone. It has now a blue logo. It's not the yellow one anymore. But those screenshots, if you have paid attention in the beginning, look very similar. And it's a bit hard to find the differences actually between Smart Sheriff and Cyber Safety Zone. You can see they changed the logo at the top, and here this text seems to be different, and it looks still pretty much the same. And while researching for this talk and preparing the slides, I obviously visited the MOIBA website a lot, and this was the old website which was suddenly gone. You can see here still like the Smart Sheriff head logo, Smart Sheriff, the strings everywhere. And you can also see like where I got the design ideas for this presentation with the dotted lines and everything. But when you visit now MOIBA website, they completely redesigned everything with a new name. You see the new logo with this happy family, and it looks very different. I also want to point out that those happy pictures are kind of creepy if you think about it. It's like this mom eavesdropping on what her kid is saying. Or this other picture looks like a happy family, but it's maybe just a dad really being controlling and what his children are doing. But I guess this is what you expect from a surveillance application. There's a recent press release regarding the passwords, because if you paid attention to when we showed the password leak, the passwords were only 4 digits. And for a very long time, there were only 4 digits, so even if the API had now the censored password, you could still easily brute force it and all this stuff. But now, they actually increased it to 9 digits, apparently. Yeah. I wonder if they forced the parents to change their passwords, or if all the users still have the 4-digit passwords. And now they even offer a web interface for this application. So when you want to log in, you have on the left side the new Cyber Safety Zone, what's obviously just Smart Sheriff, and on the right you have their other application called Smart Dream. And here, this is the web interface, and you can see here it has the time management, the application management, and the internet website management. You can add additional children, and you can see the view statistics of your children. And if you compare that to the original Smart Sheriff parent interface, it looks exactly the same, right? You have the use time management, the app management, the website management. It's clearly just Smart Sheriff under a different name. So to recap really quick, what the state today is, Smart Sheriff is still up and running, just under a different name. I assume that MOIBA just wants to get rid of the bad press in connection with their Smart Sheriff application. And today, the API is still up and running, and even if you use the old Smart Sheriff application, the new WebView will have the new logo, and they just use the old API. It's everything still up and open how we reported it. And this really sad and scary thing is that MOIBA obviously tries to hide all their issues with this renaming stuff, and instead of actually tackling the technical issues, they just try to get away with some marketing. But what about Smart Dream? Because we have looked now at Smart Sheriff, and very early in the beginning, we compared the capabilities of those two applications, and Smart Sheriff was only to restrict some usage. I mean, you can leak a lot of personal information like the name, the birthday, and the application installed, but it's the less scary alternative of some kind of surveillance, I would say. Smart Dream, on the other hand, as we mentioned in the beginning, is about monitoring SMS and instant messaging messages. So that is a lot more scary. So what's up with that? So this is the web interface, and you can see here, view keywords of worrying children, or something like that. The translation is a bit awful. So, Smart Dream. Again, you have two modes, the parent mode and the child mode. On the parent mode, it's intended to check the messages and also online searches a child is performing when they contain some dangerous or harmful words. And on the child mode, it's monitoring your SMS and also KakaoTalk, which is an instant messenger in South Korea for those messages, but also your online Google searches. It's quite interesting how they do this, because I've been thinking, how do you actually implement monitoring SMS or messages in a completely different application? And they install themselves as an accessibility service, what you would use for text-to-speech, for some accessibility features if you have trouble seeing. Then that's a way how they can get to the text of some other application. And here's the web backend. So on the left, you can see how it would look like on the application. You can see there are 2 locked SMS messages. And you can see that the phone number from whom this SMS came is censored. But that's just cosmetic. The API just displays the whole number. And on the parent backend, you can also see here some locked SMS messages. And if you are a web security guy, you may understand why the H1 is here bigger than the other messages. But before we talk a little bit more in detail about our findings, I want to quickly talk about what we do with our findings now. Because on one hand, we have those children that we also want to protect. We don't want to endanger them and give some assholes in South Korea the ability to develop bully applications where you enter the phone number and really screw with that kid. But on the other hand, MOIBA shows that they are not up for cooperation. They lie to their customers about the security fixes, and they even went so far as just rebranding and now basically doing some marketing stunt trying to hide the issues with Smart Sheriff. And the question is now, how do we still protect the children while still pushing them and forcing them maybe to get some change done? And I don't know actually the answer to that. So I have been in contact with Citizen Lab again and OpenNet Korea, and we agreed that we will present the findings on a higher level, just showing you what's possible without disclosing the technical write-up. And they are now contacting MOIBA again about these issues. And just so to protect myself legally, I guess I should say that the research was only done with my own test accounts and test phones. But what exactly are the issues? So as you have seen with the capital H1, clearly the web interface is vulnerable to some stored XSS there. And so you could just write your Korean friend SMS messages containing XSS payload and a harmful word. It gets logged, and you could XSS the parent. The worst thing about is, again, that similar to Smart Sheriff, the API is basically without any authentication. So just by knowing the phone number of the kid, you can push, again, fake SMS and instant messaging messages to the service, also including very long XSS payloads to XSS all the parents that are using this application, basically. But the way worse issue that we found with Smart Dream is that you can access more than 600,000 stored messages from SMS and KakaoTalk from over more than 48,000 children. How do I know this number without having gotten access to the whole database? Well, while testing, I saw that when I was sending myself SMS, that the message ID was just incrementing by 1. The same thing for registering a child, it was just incrementing by 1. So it seemed safe to assume that this is how many messages and also children are using this phone. And so this is a proof of concept script I've written, just dumping from one child the messages. You see from whom it received the messages. And then Smart Dream also tries to tag each message with a category of what the meaning of this harmful word is. So all those messages were apparently about blackmailing and death threats and bad stuff like that. Well, this was actually a little bit faked here, at least on this screen, just to protect a little bit me from getting sued. And I don't want to accidentally leak kids' private messages. So these are just some random Korean garbage. And this is probably the most offensive slide in our presentation because it contains those 1,086 harmful words that Smart Sheriff is monitoring when they are logging SMS or KakaoTalk messages or your Google searches. And it's just half true, like 800 of those harmful words are just for monitoring the SMS, and the other part are for monitoring what you search online. But it's crazy. And you can guess that you will eventually log messages and Google searches that are completely harmless and or just ripped out of context. You can find there words like, somewhere here's fuck, so the English word. I haven't translated all of it, but I've seen like news articles saying that the word beer is in there, or 18 years old, obviously trying to catch, you know, those kids, I don't know, screwing around a bit. But, you know, just if you wish somebody happy birthday to your 18th birthday, then that potentially could get logged by Smart Dream on their servers. So again, Smart Dream, we have another big pile of shit. We have a lot of XSS around, we have complete lack of authentication and authorization, and we can access all those messages stored from the children very easily without much hassle. I also want to mention that they also have their API responding with the clear text password, not even XOR encrypted this time, but you would need the device ID. So this is not like best practice, you intercept only one call. Oh, also did I mention it's no SSL anywhere? Again, it's just plain text HTTP. So if you get the device ID from a malicious application or whatever, you could also get the password from the parent again. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a quick note, something to think about, right? Like imagine, like we didn't find anything, and all these applications were perfectly secure. And somehow, magically, like all the code was brilliant, and it was secure somehow. Would you still trust any company or any government to have like an entire database of which phone is the, you know, for each of the phones in the country, who's the parent, who's the child, store all the messages? Would you trust any company or any government to have all that information? Would you? Okay, so like if you think about it, like the whole concept is like flawed, like at least for us Europeans, right? But it looks like Koreans have like a different mentality and they are much more used to give up privacy, but you know, like the whole concept is flawed. And now Fabian will talk about some future work.
So how are we proceeding with those things now? Obviously, we are just outsiders. I'm from Germany. I have never been to Korea. I have only like 2 Korean friends. So in the end, this is something the Korean society has to fight against. And that's why I asked you if you, I assume a lot of people have good connections to security researchers in other countries, and maybe you know somebody in Korea who can like really push some research in, around that topic. Or just contact some journalists, you know, and just raise awareness, because MOIBA doesn't learn based on the technical findings. It looks like we need some more pressure on the political and the media level. Also, you can have a look at these other child protection applications, because as we mentioned earlier, there are some mobile operators also offering free monitoring apps as an alternative to Smart Sheriff. And they are, I don't know, we haven't been able to look at those yet. And maybe they make a great project for university, so if you have a university class or something, that's something maybe fun to work on because there's a story behind it and maybe some meaningful results. And in the end, try to support some organizations like OpenNet Korea, Citizen Lab, and the Open Technology Fund, or other organizations like the EFF. Also, OpenNet Korea filed, originally when the first results came out, they created a report to the UN Human Rights Committee, I think, to discuss with, inside of the UN if those child surveillance applications are an issue for the privacy and the human rights there. And if you can research those applications and have technical findings, then you provide organizations like OpenNet Korea with enough technical facts how awful this whole thing is, and they can then fight on the political level and try to get rid of this application, and in the end, hopefully also get rid of the law. And we want to end this presentation with a quote from a Korean friend. He said that, "I've learned how virtualization works by hiding porn inside a VMware in the early 2000s and never got busted." And this quote gives me hope that in the light of increasing surveillance and monitoring and self-censorship, some bright kids will always discover a way and will learn what it means to be a true hacker. So we have time for some questions.
Do we have time for questions? 4 minutes. Maybe we play a demo while we get the questions?
Yep.
So let me...
Do you bring...
The password or the smart dream?
Do the password.
Okay.
So this is, for example, this one script dumping like the phone numbers. And this was the script I have been running back then when we were still able to leak the password. And you see how slow it brute forces. Like I didn't do any threading or anything. I just let it run for a few hours. And like here in this video, like, where do you click here? Here you can see like almost 3 minutes in, we found randomly a Korean phone number and its corresponding parent number. Cool. I'm very sorry for censoring it, but I didn't feel very comfortable disclosing the real numbers.
Leave it playing.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, the question is, have you took a look at other similar apps, I mean, kit monitoring or parental controls, or for grown-ups, or for corporates, mobile device management apps? Because we will probably find similar bugs in all this stuff, like in antivirus.
Yeah. So we haven't looked at those at all. We got into this project for Smart Sheriff because of the collaboration with Citizen Lab and OpenNet Korea and stuff, and we have looked at those mandatory applications by law, but we didn't look at any other child protection applications, but I'm sure that all of them have a lot of issues. I mean, we hear stories all the time about children bypassing those measurements on their phones or their laptops all the time.
Any other question?
We can also show the other.
Stop it?
The other.
Or play the other one?
Yep.
Let's play the other demo.
And this here is just a demo of this other application just dumping messages of children and from whom they received SMS messages. Again, censored version, I replaced all the Korean symbols with like random made up words to protect their privacy. But this is how it could look like. Okay.
No questions?
The government? Yeah. I have heard that it was a little bit of a topic why they spend that much money for MOIBA on those applications, but besides that, not much. And right now, apparently they are also in new elections are coming up, and it's now a highly politicized issue. And now OpenNet Korea tries to use this those election time when those parties are obviously fighting for votes and maybe are able to get some pressure there. But no real reactions by the Korean government.
Fingers crossed.
Yep.
So actually, congratulations to this cool project. To the situation in South Korea sounds a little bit surprising to me, because I would say in Europe, I'm personally from Austria, it would be a huge fuss if personal data would be that easily accessible. I mean, in Germany they have the Vorratsdatenspeicherung, so they just oblige companies to do all the dirty business, that the network operators do the dirty business for the government and save everything, but at least there's a judge involved for what is able to read and not. Do the South Korean people care that less, or are they used to so much surveillance that this didn't, had a huge effect on the public media?
I've tried to get in contact with some Korean people and young adults, try to ask them about their opinion and stuff. And this one guy just responded, well, okay, well, that looks bad, but we are so used to giving away our phone number when registering online, or even using our governmental ID if we want to register online. So it's very common for them to give up a lot of privacy when they are using online services or registering somewhere. And yeah, he was not surprised. He said probably all of those things have a lot of issues, and he really was not faced by it. And as you said, as coming from Germany, this would, I don't know, would be outrageous if something like this would happen. Yeah.
But for the South Korean people, it seems perfectly okay to use Smart Sheriff.
I mean, there are a lot of Korean people trying to fight this. Like OpenNet Korea, there are many people who want to fight against this, but it seems more common and less crazy to them.